Dispel Magic is essential. That's why every spellcaster in D&D 5e, barring Rangers, has access to it. It's your answer to arcane traps, powerful buffs on enemies, allies riddled with magical maladies, and spells that shut down your whole party. For starters, here's a spell magic's description. It instantly ends any spell on a target creature, object, or magical effect of 3rd level or lower, and higher leveled spells can be dispelled with a successful ability check or upcasting. For each spell slot above 3rd, you can automatically dispel a spell of equal level. For example, upcasting Dispel Magic using a 5th level spell slot will automatically dispel all spells of 5th level or lower. I'll get into the nitty-gritty of Dispel Magic's rules later on in the video, but for now, let's get into a few ways to use Dispel Magic. Use number 1 is to get past magical locks. Sure, the knock spell can get past Arcane Lock, but it also makes a rather attention-attracting noise, and the lock is only suppressed for 10 minutes, not dispelled. That makes Dispel Magic the optimal choice for any magical locks you run across, especially if you plan on coming back the same way you entered. Dispel Magic is an equally good way to shut down magical traps. Whether it's an actual spell like Glyph of Warding or Symbol, a magic trap from the Dungeon Master's Guide, or an invention of your DM's imagination, Dispel Magic is your ticket to not losing your sanity or getting blasted with fire because you stepped on the wrong tile. In a similar vein, Dispel Magic can help you to simplify magic-based puzzles. Technically, Dispel Magic only works on spells and magic traps, but I've seen plenty of DMs allow for it to dispel home-brewed magic effects, like invisible barriers and illusions that aren't created by a specific spell. If your DM wants Dispel Magic to work on these things, or the adventure explicitly says they do, it can make it much simpler to work your way through an arcane mouse maze. One piece of advice for all the uses I've mentioned so far is to pair it with Detect Magic. Whether you want to locate the source of a magical effect or learn the school of magic to be sure it's an actual spell, Detect Magic is often the first port of call when you're trying to figure out what to dispel. Plus, it's a ritual spell, so if the situation isn't urgent, you don't even need to expend a spell slot to make the most of this combination. If you don't want to prepare both, just have a buddy do it. Almost every spellcaster can cast Detect Magic. Another good use for Dispel Magic is to reveal invisible creatures. Dispel Magic can target the invisibility spell or an invisible creature if they are not hidden. The spell doesn't require sight of the target, only knowledge of a spell effect within range and line of sight as always. And rules designers have confirmed that a non-hidden invisible creature can be targeted by, and thus have their invisibility dispelled by, Dispel Magic. In short, Dispel Magic can be a good response to creatures benefiting from the invisibility or a greater invisibility spell. Once you know their location, they're as good as visible. Bonus points if you're a sorcerer using Twin Spell to uncover 2 invisible targets at once. Another valuable effect of Dispel Magic is to remove illusions. Dispel Magic is particularly good at instantly getting rid of pesky illusions, especially considering that not a single illusion spell is instantaneous. Dispel Magic is even powerful enough to instantly shut down Simulacrum, one of the most powerful spells in the game. Likewise, Dispel Magic is an excellent way to terminate permanent spells. I already touched on Arcane Lock, but why stop there? You can get rid of Continual Flame, Hollow, Magic Jar, Teleportation Circle, or even Imprisonment. You need to upcast to guarantee success on some of these, but it's totally worth it in some situations. Onto a more tactical tip for Dispel Magic, which is to prioritize targets with multiple spell effects. The more spells you can end with a single casting of Dispel Magic, the more pronounced the action economy advantage you'll gain. It's incredibly satisfying to watch the boss, who just went full Super Saiyan, go back to normal power levels, way under 9,000. Or to remove a Fairy Fire, Hypnotic Pattern, and Bane in one go. These sorts of huge swings in power go a long way in winning close fights. Side tip here, be wary of having the tables turned on you as a player. DMs also have monsters that know Dispel Magic, and if you stumble into a fight with one magically buffed to the teeth, they're likely to laugh maniacally before stripping you of all those buffs on their first turn. On the flip side, if your target has both buffs and debuffs, then you need to be careful to dispel only what you wish to dispel. Dispel Magic can dispel a specific magical effect caused by a spell. As long as you can perceive a spell and know what you're targeting, you can target just that magical effect on a target. This is especially useful if you want to be surgical about dispelling a certain magical effect to tip the scales in your favor, without inadvertently tipping the scales back the other way by dispelling an effect that was helping you. And if you're not sure exactly which spells are in play, you should try to identify spells before casting Dispel's Magic. Xanathar's Guide to Everything provides rules for identifying spells using an Arcana check with a reaction or action. This can be a useful first step before you decide whether or not to cast Dispel Magic, especially if your DM is a stickler for keeping enemy spells a secret. And my final tip is hard to put into place, but that's to prioritize persistent spell effects that are not tied to concentration. Concentration spells can be potent, but they can also be ended another way, by smacking the spellcasters who are concentrating on them. For this reason, Dispel Magic is better used on spells that don't require concentration and thus can't be removed otherwise. Mage Armor, Fire Shield, and Mirror Image are the common ones that spring to mind. But honestly, don't hold out for these spells. They're somewhat rare, and Dispel Magic is also valuable as a guaranteed way to end a concentration spell. Those are some of my best high-level tips for making the most out of Dispel Magic. To be honest, it's hard to give use cases for this spell because it's reactive by its very nature. But I think that the general tips to win the action economy by dispelling 2 or more spells for the price of 1, using it for magical traps and puzzles, and pairing it with Detect Magic hold true across campaigns and playstyles. It's also good for ending things like illusions, invisibility, and permanent or until dispelled spells. I'd also love to hear some of your favorite uses and combinations for this spell in the comments. But all that being said, Dispel Magic is one of the most commonly asked about spells in the game with regards to how its rules work exactly. I'll do my best to dispel the most common misunderstandings out there. The first thing I see people ask about quite often is whether dispelling a spell on one creature dispels it on all others. The answer is no. If a spell is dispelled from a creature, the spell may continue on other creatures. A different way of putting this is that you target one specific instance of a spell effect, not all instances of an effect caused by one spell. For example, if an enemy spellcaster buffs 3 of their allies with Bless, you can cast Dispel Magic to remove Bless from one of these creatures, but not all 3. We've even got Sage Advice Compendium confirmation on this one. Rule number 2 is that Dispel Magic cannot target a spell if its effects are instantaneous. As the Sage Advice Compendium puts it, the effects of an instantaneous spell are brought into being by magic, but the effects aren't sustained by magic. It's very similar to how Detect Magic works in this respect. Only the presence of continuous, active magic can be sensed or targeted. Basically, any spell with a duration or permanent effect can be targeted by Dispel Magic, but the 1/4 of spells in D&D 5e that are instantaneous are not eligible targets. Even if you ready an action to Dispel Magic, you won't be able to stop an instant spell with it. You'll need Counterspell to stop those. This also means that you can't dispel an instant spell like Animate Dead, but you can dispel something like Conjure Animals, which has a duration. Rule number 3 that I see people misunderstand all the time is that Dispel Magic cannot dispel magical effects on magic items. While Dispel Magic can target spells created by magical weapons or dispel a spell that's affecting a weapon, it has no effect on the magical weapon themselves. In that same thread, Dispel Magic cannot dispel magical effects that are not spells or traps. Things like a Druid's Wild Shape, a Cleric's Channel Divinity, an Abjuration Wizard's Arcane Ward, a Vampire's Charm ability, etc., etc. If it's not a spell or magical trap, Dispel Magic doesn't work on it. Of course, DMs are free to roll differently if they feel that's silly in some situations. And my final reminder is that you cannot use Dispel Magic on a spellcaster to dispel a spell cast by that spellcaster. For example, if a wizard is concentrating on Fog Cloud, you don't target the wizard with the Dispel Magic. You target the Fog Cloud. Those are my best uses for Dispel Magic and answers to its most common rules questions. Next, let's answer the most important question. Is Dispel Magic good and worthy of your 3rd level spell slot? My answer is yes, Dispel Magic is a great spell. In most scenarios, the worst case casting of Dispel Magic negates one enemy spell, evening out the action economy and dealing with a continuous threat. In prime scenarios, Dispel Magic can create a huge swing in power levels, getting rid of multiple buffs on an enemy creature, revealing an invisible foe, or dispelling a few nasty debuffs on your ally can make a big difference in a close fight. Outside of combat, Dispel Magic is even more essential. Some puzzles, traps, and means to access loot are much more easily remedied with good old Dispel Magic prepared. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you found this guide on Dispel Magic helpful and can show your appreciation with a like and subscribe. It's a massive help for small YouTubers like me. If you have any stories about using Dispel Magic in your own Dungeons & Dragons game or questions about the spell's rules, please share them in the comments below. This is D&D Lounge wishing you the best of luck in your next spellcasting venture.